You getting it twisted, getting all jelly, cause you think I'm with them, but you know you not ready. My truth got me up at 6 a.m. Tapping in the Zoom, cause my God is the REM. Straight up, he died for me. When I pull up, I know he got me. Don't play faves, we all his queens. When they say woman, they mean God.
Hey, good people. Welcome to Determined Women of Destiny, the place where passion meets purpose, where amazing women doing amazing things come to show off everything that they do. You will be influenced and inspired, encouraged and empowered, along with a whole lot of motivation so that you can believe dreams really do come true. I'm your host, Yvonne, the Motivator Man. My guest is going to drop some information like never before. This is Dr. Pepper Bonay-Martin, and she has written a book. Some of you know her as the pastor of Destiny House Christian Center, and some of you may know her as an educator. But if you didn't know, she is an author, and her book is just not a regular book. It talks about being married, feeling single, but it talks about her first marriage as a pastor to a pastor in a big old church where everybody knew. So you guys sit back, relax, and you're definitely going to enjoy the show. Now, the name of the book is I'm Married, but I Feel Like I'm Single: 5 Steps to Successfully Navigate a Painful Divorce. I'm showing you the cover because I want you to buy it. Welcome to the show, Dr. Pepper Bonay-Martin.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. It is such a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so excited because this book is a gem.
Thank you.
This is a gem, and I didn't even get through all of it, and I know what I've read, it's a gem. And if I had this after my divorce, I'd probably be remarried. I wouldn't have had so much bitterness, and I could have gotten along with my life a lot sooner. A lot of you who have gone through divorce, you understand abandonment and rejection, and you know, some of you that are in marriages, you still may feel that way. You know, and this is even good for people who you don't have a problem in your marriage. You know, this is maintenance.
That's right.
You know, if you don't maintain something, it's going to fall apart.
That's right.
Dr. Pepper, it's okay if I call you Dr. Pepper?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Tell us about what really inspired you to put pen to paper and tell your story.
Well, what inspired me, Yvonne, was I realized that what I had gone through, it was so intense emotionally, and I already had a lot of internal scars already.
Okay.
So this kind of caused me to go into a downward spiral emotionally that I didn't anticipate for my life.
See, I like that.
Yes, I didn't anticipate it, particularly growing up in church, in the church culture, and then being a leader in the church. It was awkward and it was so contrary to who I was. However, the critical, I would say, point of inspiration for me, the climactic point, was actually years later when I got remarried. And at the beginning of our relationship, I was quickly able to self-assess. There was a distinct difference in how I was feeling with my new husband in comparison to how I had felt for such a long time in my previous relationship toward the end. And at that point, I searched my soul and I realized I had forgiven my ex-husband. I was not bitter. And at that point of realization, when my two worlds came together, I realized I overcame something significant. And I said, I couldn't be the only one who has gone through this.
Wow.
And so my current husband encouraged me. I had the title written for years in like a diary, and I shared it with him. And he encouraged me to go ahead and write it.
Okay.
And I asked him, I said, "Are you sure people gonna think it's about you?" He said, "No, they're not gonna think it's about me. We gonna make sure they know it's not me." But you need to get it out because you are in a good place and I'm gonna support you. And it's not about trying to get back. This is what he said at your first husband. It's really about taking your story and helping so many other people who probably feel exactly how you felt.
Okay. So you said, growing up in church, that
Mhm.
church culture,
Yes.
I was birthed in the pews. My mother carried me in the church.
Uh-huh.
So we are raised that, I know my mother would have liked to, my grandmother would have liked me to have picked from the church.
Yes.
They didn't interest me.
Ah,
So I didn't do that. But you married, quote unquote, the church boy.
yes, I did.
And when we're raised in church and we marry the church boy,
Yes.
life is supposed to be a dream
Correct.
until the day you leave here.
Yes.
And the one who's left will leave here shortly thereafter because they cannot live without you.
Correct.
So this fairy tale, because basically that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fairy tale that
Mhm.
we're sold on that
Yes.
just because both of us
Mhm.
have the love of Christ,
Right.
we're going to get together
Mhm.
and everything's going to be okay.
Correct.
After that fairy tale no longer existed for you,
Right.
and you realize I'm in the middle of something, like you said, you didn't expect it,
Mm-mm.
but we're also taught till death do you part.
That's correct.
So getting a divorce
Mm.
wasn't something that you can rightly say,
Oh.
yeah, we're just gonna, sign some paperwork and it's over and done with because you have responsibilities to your church.
Mhm.
You feel you have responsibility to God.
Mhm.
And that's how I felt.
Mhm.
And as I started reading and reading, I realized, hey, death isn't always physical.
Mhm.
As far as I gotta clock out of here,
Mhm.
but is not death also death to your relationship because of the way you have been acting
Mhm.
towards your partner?
Mhm.
That's not biblical.
That's right.
And when I discovered that, I was like, okay, give me the pen. Because I wanted freedom not from the relationship as much as I wanted freedom in my own spirit
Mhm.
because I was so vexed,
Mhm.
And I know, my aunt was like, you know how much money your parents spent, that type of thing. We're held to that. But I had the dress, it's still in the cleaners,
Right.
you know.
Right. That's right.
But there's so much more to that.
Yes.
And during your marriage, when did you come to realize there's so much more that I'm not getting? And if I'm not getting it, I can't give it.
Wow. So everything that you said, let me say it this way, you nailed it.
Oh,
You nailed it because you have re-solidified that this book has purpose.
absolutely.
And there were so many points that I had. There wasn't just one that I had. I realized I wasn't getting a lot from the marriage at the onset of the downfall. And then as it got worse, I realized I, was getting even less than before and less than before. And each time I delayed an exit, I ended up below zero.
Oh,
So I was starting out in a negative place. And I was an emotional basket case serving while bleeding. And the church culture, specifically after you're ordained, specifically after you've been preaching a long time. And I could preach. At that time, I was getting engagements all over the place, and not just domestically, but internationally, that I had to, that my ex-husband was very jealous of and interfered with that. And it worked on my self-esteem. And then I started saying no, 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 no. And then we joined a church where our pastor had asked, since it was a new ministry at the time, all of the leaders who were ministers to put their ministries on hold so that we can focus on developing the church. But by then, by the time I was released, I had told so many people no that my ministry now also suffered. So I had a lot of different critical points where I realized I was no longer not just not getting anything from it, but I had lost so much more from staying in it just too long. And I want to say, I want to address something that you said before. First of all, I want to be clear, particularly for the listening audience, in if there is anybody who is a spiritual leader or a part of the world of ecclesia specifically, I don't believe in divorce. I do agree with the scripture that we should really pray and do our due diligence. But I also don't believe in just praying before you get married. I believe that people should pursue professional premarital counseling and determine if you are compatible, because compatibility is significant in making sure that your marriage is maintained. And then after that, you really need to be trained in order to look for, even when those conditions are positive, look for possible red flags that are real threats to your relationship and don't ignore them. And make a list. And I'll talk about this in the book of your negotiables and your non negotiables. And if you see a significant amount of non negotiables, even if you are compatible, even if you both believe the same, you both have God as your center, I would encourage people not to walk down the aisle with that person until that individual acknowledges whatever it is that needs to be acknowledged. It's not always the man, sometimes it's the woman. But the reason why I say that is because while I am really happy to be remarried to a wonderful man now, divorce is really death to your spirit. Even if you are in a pre-existing terrible situation. My ex-husband decided to divorce me. And what made my situation even more painful was that because I had such an outgoing personality, everybody thought that I was the one who pulled the trigger. And for several people, I never got a chance to even be asked. And it was assumed, and that was thrusted upon me, which was more dirt on my grave. So he was the one who divorced me, but the way he did it was another thorn in my side. And I would say we were married for almost 20 years. The first 10 years of our relationship was awesome. And that was the other thing. The statistics say that when you get to the 7-year mark, that is usually the demarcation point where things will tend to go south. And people, but we made it past that statistician and what that statistician had said, and those statistics showed. And to get to the 10-year mark and to have had such a wonderful friendship, because he was my friend for 4 years prior to getting married. We met through church, but at the church event, we found out that we both attended the same college. So we started out as buddies and carpool partners.
I was going to say,
yes, the talk about that at the beginning, and it was awesome. And then we really became very close. Our love was real. We really did love each other, and we loved each other intensely. We loved each other for real, and we were extremely close to be such a young couple. So it went from that to the complete opposite in record time. And I felt like, Lord, I've walked up right before you and I've been serving you. I'm trying to minister. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. You think that why, when there's so many people you can think of, The way they feel as though this should have been them, but it doesn't happen that way. The scripture says, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but God will deliver us out of them all. And so I have a whole new respect for the concept as we've been taught, and you eloquently pointed out, of being equally yoked and the socialization process of couples getting together in church. I do believe that believers should be with one another, but it may not necessarily be your church. That is a vast amount of people.
Y'all heard that right.
It may not be your denomination, okay? It may not be where grandma and them raised you. And you can't
look like
you
it.
okay? And you can't allow your family, as much as we love them, to pick your spouses for you. They should have something to say because our families know us. But the ultimate decision has to be divinely inspired as well as made between the two people, with all of the signals that other people who know you and love you may say, because that's important, because they can see the blind spots.
Right, that we can.
And we can. And all of that information combined together needs to be assessed with wisdom and through prayer. So it sounds like a lot of work, but it's worth it. Marriage is a beautiful thing. It is an honorable thing. It's honorable in the sight of God. However, when you don't marry the right person for the right reason, and you go into it that way, or in my case, I don't feel like either one of us married the wrong people. We felt as though we were very compatible. We lasted for 10 years. But my partner decided to drift. And at that point, we had different philosophies, different expectations, and he had a different, I would say, goal for his life. And I was mortified and I was left devastated. But after I got myself together, that was his choice. I just wish that I didn't go a whole nother 10 years waiting for him to empower me with what to do. I literally waited like a very vulnerable, a victimized person, waiting to see if we were going to get back together, waiting the full decision on our reconciliation or complete termination of the relationship was left in his hands. And I don't believe that that was the correct choice. And I would not advise that specifically for the women, because we are socialized to do it that way in church. And I was miserable and I paid a significant price. And so at that point, I became very ill. And our marriage was obviously had come apart. He had already started cheating. The signs were there. And however, we were still married. I was very sick. He had to take me to the emergency room.
Okay, we're gonna stop right there. I have to go to break.
Okay.
Gotta pay the bill.
Okay.
I know y'all are sitting on the edge of your seat. Don't worry. I'm coming back. And we're gonna hear the rest of Dr. Pepper Bonay-Martin's journey through this process of this divorce and to the place where she's at now with a good, solid marriage. So you guys come on back. Like I say, go turn that chicken over, stir them collards, and come on back. Determined Women of Destiny is more than a talk show or a podcast, more than a Facebook group or TikTok videos. It's a tribe that vibes. It's a networking hub for women to funnel ideas and endeavors, to connect, helping each other be the best version of themselves, independently and collectively. If you would like to be a guest on the show or would like to join this great group of women, please email determinedwomendestiny@gmail.com. Determined Women of Destiny. Hey, good people. It's Yvonne, the Motivated Man, and you are back, and I am too. If you're just tuning in, this is Determined Women of Destiny. My guest has been Dr. Pepper Bonay-Martin. She is the pastor of the Destiny Center, I'm sorry, Destiny House Christian Center. And we've been talking about her new book, I'm Married, but I Feel Like I'm Single. You got to get this book. If you're just tuning in, you know what I always say, shame on you, because the good stuff is in the beginning, but that's okay. You know, I love you. I can't do this without you. And you're going to want to rewind this and go to the beginning because Pastor Dr. Pepper is talking about her relationship. And for those of us that are, you know, church girls, and you know, we raised married a church boy and lived happily ever after, that just wasn't this story. So, Dr. Pepper.
Yes.
Before we went to break, you were talking about your illness.
Yes.
So tell us, you know, you go into the hospital and this is at the point when your husband has decided that I'm not going to stay in the confines of this marriage anymore. And I'm going to do some stuff that just isn't what we thought we should do in a marriage. And you get sick.
I got very sick. I was definitely sick. I didn't know how sick I was. He took me to the emergency room and he dropped me off. I go inside, and that's really not so unnatural because sometimes that has to be done and you go find a parking space. That's what I thought he was going to do and come back. When I got to the emergency room, I go straight to triage. I check myself in. The triage nurse looks at me and apparently saw something from a medical lens that I didn't see and stops the triage interview and runs out and comes right back and puts me in a wheelchair. And I'm saying, what's the matter? She said, your coloring is completely off. We're taking you in now.
My goodness.
I said, okay. She takes my pressure. It was through the roof. They take my vitals. They were completely off. I'm in an examination room in less than 5 minutes. That is rare at an emergency room. And she asks me who brought me. I told her. They started paging. No response.
So you're in here going through all of this alone, but thinking that the man you're married to is just outside parking the car.
Correct.
And that's why he's not answering the page.
Correct. I'm saying, and I said to her, oh, he's probably still looking for a parking space. And she said, oh, okay. Because it was a very rapid time frame. Now, some more time lapses. I get a phone call from the assistant pastor of our church about something totally unrelated. She hears beeping in the background and asks me, am I okay? I finally said no. And I told her where I was and what was going on. She said, I'll call you back. She calls our pastor. He calls. And he immediately goes into prayer. And he immediately starts going into his prayer language. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I pass out. I hear them say, the doctor say clear.
Wow.
And I woke up, I believe it was either 2 or 3 days later, in a hospital bed. And I woke up to my physician at the foot of my bed crying.
Your doctor's crying.
My doctor's crying.
Okay, why is your doctor crying?
That's what I said. I'm like, well, did he take the wrong part of it? I have surgery. I'm like, what's going on?
Oh my goodness.
And he tells me, we had grown to know each other. And he looks at me, takes my hand, and he says, I've been a doctor for a long time. And I do this because I love what I do. And I've gotten to know the character of people down through the years through my profession very well. And he looks at me, holding my hand, and says, you're a good woman. Mm. And I said, thank you, doctor. And he says, I have never seen someone who was married, dropped off by their spouse in the condition that you were in, and they not respond.
Wow.
I have to tell you, we paged your husband, we called your husband. It was 3 days, and he has
No
not,
response.
no response, and he has not been here. And I see that you are waking up. We saw you stirring, and I decided to come in to be the one to tell you.
So when was the next time that you heard from him?
When I was leaving, he picked me up, which was a little more than 2 weeks.
Dr. Pepper,
I can't make this up.
2 weeks later, you're in the hospital. 2 weeks.
More than 2 weeks.
More than 2 weeks. But did you call him to pick you up?
They did.
Oh, the hospital
The
did.
hospital did.
And he decided I will come back
Yeah,
and
I'm
pick her
being
up.
discharged, yes, because he was listed as my emergency contact.
So what about your family at this point? Did they know that you were in the hospital?
Nobody knew where I was.
He didn't
had to
say
tell
anything.
them. No, he did say something. He just didn't tell them the truth. He told them I was home, I was resting, I was under the weather. My mother knew something was wrong.
For almost 3 weeks?
That's correct.
So what did he tell the church?
He told them I was home resting and I was fine. And I had been under the weather, and then I was a little sick, but I would be, back. Now, he knew to say that because even though he wasn't in the emergency room with me, I know our pastor had said something to him about the encounter that I had with him and our assistant pastor at the time. So they knew I
That he
was
was
in, well, they didn't know that, but they knew that I was in the hospital at the time. They knew I had said I was in the emergency room. So feeling ill and convalescing fit.
his story.
Yes, because why would they pursue
Right.
any further when the last encounter that I had with both of them was that I was in the emergency room. However, I had not had any contact with my family at all. So when I got out and he came to pick me up, I told him to take me to my mother's house. Why? I said, don't take me home.
I was like, was there a conversation in the car? Like,
That was it.
bro?
Right.
Like,
All I said was take me to my mother's house.
and his response was why?
Why? Why aren't you going home? I don't have a home, is what I said.
And his response to that was,
Why are you saying that? You know why I'm saying it. Where have you been? And then I said, you know what? Don't even bother. Take me to my mother's house. And he wasn't really fighting. He entertained the conversation just enough to absolve himself of any guilt, but not deeply enough like he really can. And that's when I knew. I knew. You know, it's like when somebody passes away, we have the funeral, the casket is open, but the real point of pain, particularly for that individual's closest loved ones, is the burial. Because that is a point of no return.
that's them, it's
done. It's done. And you still haven't had closure, but you have to accept they're not coming back. And that's what happened to me. It was very much like the hospital scenario was the funeral homegoing service, but the drive to my mom's was the burial.
Now, the infidelity did play a part.
Oh,
So, was the infidelity at the end of the good 10 years? And it started at the beginning of the bad 10 years?
Right there.
Right there, okay. And was he still in ministry?
Yes. Still leading the department.
Okay.
Both of us were still in ministry. No one knew the depth of what we were going through, that I wasn't even, we had a place, but I didn't see him until Sunday with everybody else. He was never home.
Really?
Yeah,
And did he ever give an explanation for his reason not being home?
no. And I would ask him, I had gone through the whole thing, of getting in the car 3 o'clock in the morning, looking at all of the possible places where he could be. I've been through all of that.
Wow.
Calling his parents, asking if he's there, then screaming and crying, and then calling hospitals, calling police stations, calling everything that you can think of, just with the hope, like sometimes hoping that he was hurt.
Right.
And at least I would know he's alive. And then after a while, all of that ceased. I just didn't care anymore. I cared, but I said I can't care. And when I said I can't care, I started practicing how it would look not to care, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's deep to
Yes.
practice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show myself
Correct.
how not to care
Correct.
because I need not to.
That's right, for survival.
Right. I've been hurt enough. This
That's
is
right.
my defense mechanism.
That's right.
Now, did the two of you have children?
No, we did not, unfortunately. I didn't even tell him that early on, during this time, that I was pregnant and I lost, our child, and he was never aware of that. And so we didn't have children at that point. And I, at that point didn't want kids with him. So I wasn't even thinking about, moving into a family. At that point, I just wanted myself back. I lost who I was. I did not have a clue as to how I got where I was.
That was going to be my question. Do you feel like you lost your identity
Absolutely.
in the relationship? Because you said that, everybody was calling, not just domestically, but internationally. And then the phone call stopped because you backed up because it made his ego feel better.
Correct.
Because he wasn't getting those calls.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. I made critical mistakes, and that's why he did the breaching, but I became a co-conspirator to my own pain.
That's all I got to say. A finger in your face. Because a lot of y'all watching is my life coach, guys. That's all I got. That's all I got to say.
It's the truth, and I have to own my contribution. I cannot be who I am and be integral and say it was all his fault. He did a lot of wrong things that I did not deserve at all. That's the truth. But I continue to, I would say, give a message that it was okay to treat me.
You
like
accepted
that.
it.
I accepted it.
Yeah.
And I positioned myself to be in this tug of war whereby it became very comfortable for him to go do what he needed to do and know that I was pretty much still would be there. I was needy. I had become codependent. I had health issues at that point, and my self-esteem was shot. And I thought that I would now really be paid by God, so to speak, for all of my trauma. That God would kind of just rain down all of these blessings of splendor in my favor
Because you suffered.
because I suffered. It's time for the 3 days of resurrection after the crucifixion. I was waiting for God to do this. And God all the time was waiting for me. And while I do believe that in prayer, I did fulfill his will in adhering to some of the things that I knew he told me and how to handle it. so that I wouldn't completely lose it, because there were some days I was suicidal. There were other days I was homicidal.
I would think that the two would have went hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Because I know for me, well, most of my days was homicide. It
Really,
it really was. It was like I could just get this cat dying and nobody would know nothing. The baby sleep. And you don't even get a chance to scream. So you out of here. So yeah, I totally get that, but I understand when you say you lost yourself.
Absolutely.
In relationships like that, you don't get to shine bright.
No, at all.
You dim down because somebody is literally standing in front of you like this.
That's right.
Like you can't shine.
That's right.
I'm going to be a shield in front of you.
That's right.
So no one gets to see how wonderful you are. But I'll talk about how wonderful you are.
Oh, thank you.
But nobody gets to see you.
Nobody got to see me.
Nobody gets to see you.
And I lost my own internal vision of myself.
So all your dreams that you had
Yes.
put on paper
Yes.
of what you would do and at the
Yes.
time slots you wanted to do,
Correct.
totally gone.
Gone, and had been invested in his dream. And I immersed myself, my career, my skills, my mind.
This brings me to Waiting to Exhale. That song, 11 years. She said 11 years I was there for you. And we do that.
We do. And women have more of a tendency to do it than men, but men do it too. And they were my prime years. You don't get that youth back anymore. I spent my youth developing this man, his dream, his desires. I put off and actually changed my career set. I invested my money. He took advantage of my credit and my credit score. He left me in debt. Him and his partner stole my identity, opened up loans using my social security number. It was crazy.
But we have to reiterate.
Come on.
There's pastor in front of this man's name.
Lord have mercy. You had to go there. Because
it's hard for me. Now, okay, did you wrong? Cheated. But stole your identity, your money, and passes in front of their name.
He was an ordained elder, and so was I. And that was the thing that was a whole nother level of diminishing for me that I could not wrap my mind around. Okay, because it's one thing to cheat, and you kind of go into this thinking that there's a possibility that's going to happen, right? You hope that it doesn't, but there's always going to be somebody prettier than you, better shape than you. And these are the things that wear on our psyche and our self-esteem and all of those kinds of things. But we were also good friends. And a good friend is not going to steal from me, let alone my social security number and my identity, and get access to credit in your spouse's name and don't tell the spouse. And these are corporate accounts to help run his business with someone else, not with me. My name was on those papers, but he took on another partner, didn't consult. So now I'm sick in the house and I'm thinking, okay, what the other stuff is obvious. But when you're stealing somebody's identity and it's your husband, you don't know that right away.
Right.
You don't know it until it is time for you to get something where you need your credit report. Or you get they let you know, or you start getting phone calls and you can't explain. Or people start calling the house and threatening your life and the life of your family. I'm like, what is this? And I'm confronting him, and he's telling half of the story, half of this, guns being pulled. My life was threatened. His life was threatened. My mother was being followed in the street. Had borrowed money from people in our neighborhood and didn't say a word.
Well, who was he borrowing this money from? People with guns.
Right.
Bro, where was you going?
Right.
What loan
You
shark?
wasn't
know what I mean?
exactly. And dealing with
goodness.
people that you wasn't, first of all, you wasn't raised in this life. You don't even know what you're doing. Let's go there.
Okay, that was my question
Mhm.
because this is a church boy.
That's
Not saying
correct.
that church
Mhm.
boys don't have swag.
Yeah.
They don't
No.
have streets, and
Yes.
we're not saying that at all.
Mhm.
What we're saying is that to go to the point of borrowing money from someone that will come after your family,
Right.
that's a whole nother level of street.
That's correct.
That's different than just the yo boy on the
That's
corner,
correct.
selling a little something, something.
And
That's
he did
mob
not
related.
have swag. He did not know what he was doing. He was churched and had stepped into a world. I don't know if he felt robbed because he was also raised very strict. And this was an opportunity for him to experience something or to test something that he may have felt like he needed to. I don't know. But clearly he was not that. He was intellectual. He was not just a church boy.
Mhm.
He was always called nerd. He was smart. He was exceptionally smart. He was very intellectual, very well spoken. And so he did not fit the profile. And so there would be no way that I would even consider that he would do this at all to anybody, let alone to me. Not just your wife, but I had also been a very good friend.
Right, your friend.
And so now I'm spiritually in shock, emotionally devastated, and financially unraveled.
Wow.
And by the time we finally got divorced, I'm $500,000 in debt.
Now listen.
And those are the days of homicide.
I gotta cut this right now. But you guys gotta come back for part 2.
Mhm.
Because she's gonna give us the rest of this story in part 2. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. I appreciate you. What I always say, keep doing what you're doing till what you're doing gets done. But you make sure you come back for part 2 because this is even better.
There goes a woman of God. They be looking like, whoa, there goes a woman of God. I'm a woman, I'm a woman, I'm a woman.